All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Tuesday. It's an Arlen Tuesday. Arlen, you had a little dental work done yesterday. You felt that was more important than being on Halitics. I don't know about your priorities, my friend.
Well, when my teeth are kind of falling out of my mouth, I think I have to do something about it. And so that's what I did.
All right. Well, all right. I'm glad they got them back in. I'm glad they put them back in. So Arlen with us, of course, and we're going to really focus on his blog, thebigpicturereport.com, two recent articles he's posted. One he wrote himself, which I always prefer, Arlen, is when they're your work rather than links to what others have done. And that's no exception today. I really found what you wrote very provocative and worth exploring, as well as what you linked to by Greg Powell. So we'll get into that, but I just wanted to start, as I have so often, Arlen, with, well, it's not the Middle East, but it's linked. This is a story about yesterday being the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, one of the greatest criminal sites, right, where terrible crime was committed. And I don't know if you were really focused on that at all, but there's some interesting, aspects to this latest story. Let me just real quick throw out at you, Vladimir Putin not invited. He was directed not to attend. He actually spoke 20 years ago at the 60th anniversary of the liberation, representing Russia, of course, the nation whose army freed Auschwitz, liberated Auschwitz, and he spoke there. He was, 20 years ago, he was given quite a round of applause, not invited. And the president of Israel, or I should say the prime minister of Israel, rather, the leader of that country, Bibi Netanyahu, was invited, and he was offered safe passage despite the fact that he's under an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court. However, he opted not to attend. Any thoughts about those two absent national leaders?
Well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, you would think both of those leaders would be there, but the fact that they're not, says a lot about, where we are in the world these days. And, Putin's very much becoming, a very vicious dictator, in my opinion. And I think, and Benjamin Netanyahu is just too much like Trump, in my opinion. And he's going too far. But at least right now we have a truce, and that's surprising in itself. And so far it's been holding, at least for a little while, and we got to hope for the best.
Yeah, positive news about the truce. I don't think a lot of people view Putin as a exemplar of democracy whatsoever. And I think with regard to Netanyahu, the fact that he was invited is almost a shame, because if the message of Auschwitz, as many have said, is never again, then how could you honor or fet or even welcome the leader of a nation that is complicit in that is responsible for an ongoing genocide? I think that would be a very difficult task. And I know you question that. You think genocide may be too strong, and there is a ceasefire. It's true, Arlen, but Amnesty International says it's a genocide. The UN has said there's good reason to think it's a genocide. And if you look at the pictures of Gaza, it looks just absolutely horrific.
Well, we both agree on that. We both agree that Israel's gone too far, that Netanyahu is, gone way too far. He's sort of like a Trump-like person. He holds on to power, doesn't want to give it up. He's afraid he might end up in jail or something like that. And he's going all in and going just too far, and certainly making Israel's image in the world a very poor one.
Well, you think it's even fair to Trump to put him in the same category with Netanyahu? I don't think there's really anything Trump's done to date that compares to this. I mean, the complete leveling of people's homes, an entire community of several million people completely raised. 1.5 million people, Trump says, and Haaretz agrees with that number. 1.5 out of a little over 2 million, 2.5 million people, more than 50% of Gazans homeless, no place to go. At least half of 100,000, perhaps many more killed.
Well, of course, Trump's only been in it about a week or so, you got to give him time to see what he's going to do. But right now he's talking about clearing out Gaza. How is he going to do that? And, you have to question what his real plans are. In fact, with everything, he's just kind of, freewheeling it at the moment and, going in all kinds of different directions. And we just don't know where he's going to end up when it comes to Gaza.
I think that's a fair point, but I would note that it isn't just 1 week that he's been in power. He actually was president for 4 years, and he wasn't during that time responsible for an Iraq-like invasion or Libya, what Obama did to Libya. So he does get a little bit of, there is a history there, at least we can look at, which I think does protect him as of now. And as you point out, he's got 4 years to go from that kind of analogy to put him in the same category as a Bibi or a Hitler, I think, at this point. And it could happen. I'm not defending Trump. Some of his recent decisions, I think, are horrific, and we'll get to those, but I can't put him in the same league as a Bibi.
I agree with you, Hal. At this point, you can't put Trump in that category, especially in foreign policy. He hasn't done anything that horrendous. What he's doing is pretty horrendous in our country, but that's different than foreign policy, of course.
I just confirm that we are live, and I was also hoping we were on, and it says we're live, so it looks like we're on TikTok. Arlen, I don't know, have you ever been on TikTok before? It's been very difficult for me to get this program on TikTok, but I think I finally did it.
Well, I think Trump may have helped you. He said, Hal needs to get on TikTok, so I'm going to make sure he has that opportunity. Well,
he won't like my program so much today, and I don't know if he liked mine yesterday either. I was pretty critical of his cruel and inhumane immigration policy. I actually got some credit for doing that. I want to play some clips. We're going to get to your article about the death of democracy at the hands of the Supreme Court, specifically the Republican court of W. Reagan and H.W. But I did want to play a clip just to, I guess, center Holocaust survivors as well as those who I think who drew the correct lesson from the horrible crime of which they were a victim. So let's see. This is actually from London. These folks did not get to speak. I don't know if they were invited. I don't know what happened. I don't believe there was any speeches about Palestine at Auschwitz yesterday, but this is from London.
I had 15 members of my extended family killed in Auschwitz, and I'm partly here as an act of remembrance of them, and also to try and make clear that a big body of Jewish opinion survivors and descendants of survivors and just socialist Jews are against the current Holocaust going on in Gaza, and the lesson of the Holocaust that we had suffered is that it should not be repeated against anyone.
We often hear the word never again used, but I'm afraid that's become rather an empty phrase. It's been repeated so often since the Second World War, and here we have it again, taking place in Palestine. It's all.
I just want to stop that clip for a second, Arlen. I won't necessarily play all of it, but the woman who just spoke, I looked at her and I thought she's pretty young to be a survivor. I don't know if people could read the caption there. She's the daughter of a survivor, Sonia, I guess is pronounced Sonia, spelled Sonja, Sonia London. So obviously English from her accent, and many survivors actually did go to the UK, and she's one of them as well as some of the other speakers here. So I appreciate what she had to say. It seems like the Holocaust Museum hasn't quite viewed the lesson of the Holocaust, meaning never again for anybody, but more from their perspective, never again for
I think
Jews.
we need to say, too, it's just kind of sad that we're nearing the end where people who went through the Holocaust and survived are alive. So pretty soon they'll be all gone, and they'll still be the Holocaust deniers, which is a real shame. So, but they make good points. Those people that spoke that horrible things were done to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are doing similar kind of things, not to the extent, of course, number-wise, as in World War II, but it's not a good sign when all this inhumanity is going on from so many places, and so many people are victims of it.
All right, just so folks could see that, and I appreciate that comment. Arlen, just had to rearrange a little bit of boxes on your screen. For some reason, my program always puts a little window of me speaking on your side, and I sometimes don't correct that. So just a little inside
Move
baseball.
Over.
Say it again, Arlen.
Move over.
Yeah.
You said we got to be even.
No, you're right in the middle. I got you right where I want you, and I ain't moving you. So I have tried to be fair to Trump. So if people say he's, another Hitler or another Netanyahu, I try to say, well, he hasn't done that. But being fair to someone means you also acknowledge when they do terrible things, and Trump has done some really, really awful things. And I always focus, or I've often focused on his cruel and inhumane immigration policies. But, those who said, and I think you were one of them, Arlen, that he would likely be even worse when it comes to supporting Israel, you have an argument. And this is a news headline that I found very upsetting. Biden had paused back in, I think it was June, the delivery of these 1-ton bombs. He continued to supply Israel the 500-pound bombs, and we saw the moonscape, the demolition site, as Trump calls it, that is now Gaza. Obviously, those bombs did the damage, did enough damage, but Trump is giving Israel the weaponry to do 4 times as much. I don't know how much more damage per bomb, and it's criminal. If once Israel starts up again, as I think we all imagine it will, then he'll be complicit in that ongoing genocide. I don't think Trump is doing very much to, as far as making peace in the Gaza area yet. But at least, if they're not fighting, that's good. And, if Israel continues to, stop the intense warfare, and Hamas continues to let some prisoners out, it's a good sign, and we're everybody's hoping it's going to stand, but we just don't know. And then so many things are happening so quickly right now. Like I say, Trump's only been in office barely a week, and he's just doing 100 things every day, every hour. There's something new and different, and it's hard to keep up. Are you watching Halitics? I do ask you to subscribe. Just put the subscribe button in there. Also, we are, of course, on Facebook, and I put together that little, see if I can find it. I don't have my Facebook because I'm in a different window than I usually, different source, scene is the term I'm looking for than I usually use, Arlen. Before we get into your article about the death of democracy, you mentioned Trump's doing a lot of things. He's certainly been busy. Tell me about what struck you, either positive or probably most likely negative, that Trump has been doing over the past week.
I think he's trying to overwhelm everybody. I think it's kind of a shock and awe type approach. He's just, getting involved in every single aspect. He's not really holding to the Constitution so much, and there's a lot of people very upset that he's doing things that he's really not legally allowed to do. So whether there's going to be real opposition is hard to say. The Democrats seem pretty much helpless. They don't know what to do, and there's no real strong organized opposition. There's not a giant women's march in Washington like there was the first time Trump got elected. So everything's up in the air right now, in other words, and we just don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks.
Well, let me ask you again, is there something in particular, I mean, the kind of the anti-woke actions where basically there are orders you can't teach DEI in the military? I believe trans people are now no longer welcome in the U.S. Armed Forces. That's one example. There are kind of these massacre, they call it Monday Morning Massacre, whatever you want to call it, of the federal workers, where many have been put on leave. The roundup of immigrants has begun. So these are all, I believe, very, very troubling at best and horrible at worst.
Yeah, the most horrible thing, and I think most people would agree with me, was his pardoning of everybody in January 6th, all the people all these rioters that attacked the cops, and they're on tape, on video, doing all kinds of horrendous things. They injured a lot of cops. A lot of cops died, right after this experience. And, there's no question that, they're insurrectionists, and yet, to Trump, they're heroes, they're hostages, and all this and that. I think he went way too far.
All right. Arlen with us, most upset, it sounds, or you just said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, by the pardoning of the January 6th rioters, insurrectionists, if you want to, or if that's how you characterize what happened on that date. And as I mentioned, there were a number of other actions that Trump has taken that I find more problematic, especially the roundup of immigrants, but also, the DEI stuff I don't like, but I don't find that quite as bad. But it's not good. But the rounding up immigrants, separating families, putting people on planes to go back to places they may have, if anything, very vague memories of, I find that absolutely reprehensible.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting sent overseas, deported, and a lot of them haven't even committed any crimes. They're just here illegally, which is not what I'd call a major crime. But what's going on right now, we just don't know how bad it's going to get. But obviously, he's very committed to getting rid of a lot of immigrants, a lot of people who aren't maybe of the right race and color, and I think that's part of it too.
Yeah. So Arlen, you attribute this situation, really, the fact that Trump was elected and is now in a position to, and is doing a lot of, I believe, harm, a lot of damage. Is the positive. Yes, we do have the ceasefire, and I don't belittle that. That's a really big deal to me. It's a huge deal. But by authorizing the deployment of those huge bombs to Israel, I fear that if Israel starts up its onslaught, it'll be as bad or worse than what we've already seen, if it could even possibly be worse. So a lot of things to be very concerned about with this new Trump administration. And if I'm not reading too much or adding too much, my sense, Arlen, is you attribute that to a country that's no longer a democracy. In other words, I guess, are you saying, and this came out on the 21st, a week ago, at the bigpicturereport.com, which is where Arlen, of course, blogs, the California Thoughtleader. Is it your view that Trump is not a democratically elected president at this point?
I think one of the main points that I'm saying in this particular article was that around somewhere in the 1970s, the Republicans and the conservatives, the MAGA types, they decided that they're going to make a push to take over a lot control of a lot of the country, and they've been pushing toward that. They've been pushing toward getting right-wing judges nominated, and it got to the point where in 2010, because of those judges, they decided, Citizens United said anybody could give any amount of money they want.
All right, welcome back to Halitics, and I do see we're streaming, Arlen, although not exactly where I was hoping we'd be, but I'll put everything together and edit it into one nice big ball of wax. That was a weird thing that just happened. All right, let's get into it. Your article, you talk about, give us the thumbnail sketch again about your article about how democracy died in America.
Yeah, it wasn't all that long ago that people were worried that people with a lot of money would influence elections. And so, most people didn't want to see that happen. So we had reforms, McCain-Feingold were attempted and all that. And the reforms never really went anywhere. And now, thanks to the Supreme Court, with Citizens United, they decided that corporations or people, that they could give unlimited amounts of money. And with super PACs, they don't even have to disclose where the money's coming from. It could even come from a foreign source. So, this is just, ridiculous. And not only that, there's just, nobody really knows how. Yeah, I mean, all right, let me put it this way. We get inundated from candidates saying, oh, give us $10, give us $25, it'll make a difference. But how much difference will it make against somebody like Elon Musk, who has $250 million or more to spend to help Donald Trump get elected? It's a joke. We're no longer a democracy.
So one point that I gleaned from your article, and I thought the history was very informative and important, how back in the probably late 60s or at the latest, the early 70s, corporate leaders, right-wingers had enough. They were fed up with civil rights, with students protesting in the streets, with the high taxes that as they saw it that they had to pay. They wanted to take the government back. They want to take the country into their hands, put it back in their hands as they saw it. The rightful owners, the billionaire class, although they weren't really billionaires, the corporate elites, and they had a plan, and they put Lewis Powell on the Supreme Court, who was in many ways a moderate. He was not an extremist in many ways, but he did believe in, I guess, the power of money, and he got the court around, and as did Reagan, and as did put HW with Clarence Thomas. I thought that history was very important and very valuable. What I also gleaned, Arlen, and tell me if I'm wrong, is you seem to believe this is basically a Republican problem. In other words, it's the Republican Party that has been completely captured by the big money interests. Is that right? You don't think the Democrats bear some also have done, turned corporate?
Not to the same extent as the Republicans. I think the Democrats just sat back and watched as the Republicans started getting more power and giving more power to the elite and the billionaires and so on. And the Democrats, took advantage of it in the sense that they took corporate money, they took donations, and they tried to help those who donated them, made them more important than anybody else. But I think the Republicans were by far the ones who pretty much changed our system so that we are being run now by the wealthy. And I don't think there's any question about it. They keep getting richer and richer, and there's no stopping point at this point.
You don't think the Democrats could have, for example, you present this as an inevitability. And I think there's a lot of truth. I don't want to defend in any way Citizens United. I think it's just as bad as you say it is. But I think the corruption is just as bad on the Democratic side. And I'll give you an example. It wasn't inevitable that Trump become president. Probably Bernie Sanders would have beaten him. But the Democratic Party coalesced against the candidate who was for working people, who was for the consumer, who was against the military state. They went in favor of somebody, Hillary Clinton, whose record was pro-corporation, pro-war. So I don't know how that's the Republicans' fault.
It's Republicans' fault because they're the ones who really pushed hard to get all these things to happen. where the rich people would get everything they want. Anytime, the Democrats just couldn't keep up. I made the point that the Democrats are basically a polite party. They don't try to make waves in the same extent as the Republicans do. The Republicans just went all out and to get what they wanted. The Democrats kind of, looked like they didn't know what to do. And it's true that the Democrats, take advantage of these rules, and they will take money from corporations and will give the corporations what they want. So again, democracy is disappearing. And I just think the Republicans, it's just much worse. I think every single Republican pretty much is in bed with corporations and billionaires. I don't think every single Democrat is, but yeah.
Well, every Democrat, and this is what you were saying. Well, you say that it's the decision that the Citizens United that led to a mentally unstable, sex-abusing felon and career grifter to become president of the U.S. That suggests, right, that the voter had this really great option. We could have picked somebody who was on the side. See, that's why I don't endorse fully your description. If Bernie had lost, if the Democratic Party had rallied behind Bernie in 2016 or in 2020, and he had lost to Trump, and it had been because of overwhelming financial advantages that Trump had, then I would feel that the evidence was stronger on your side. But that's not what happened. The Democratic Party itself selected a candidate who unquestionably, certainly in 2016 and probably in 2020, but certainly in 2016, a candidate who I think we all could see was less likely to beat Trump.
Well, I think that. Well, I don't know. I think Biden had a good shot at beating Trump, and he did.
Well, let's say 2016. Let's focus on 2016, not 2020.
Well, 2020 was when Biden won, and he did beat Trump.
Right, but I'm talking about 2016, which is when the party rallied behind Hillary. Even though she was unpopular, even though she had many skeletons in her closet, even though Bernie was much more popular at that point among Republicans and among independents, leaving aside Democrats for the moment. I don't know that you can lay that action by the Democratic leadership, by Barack Obama, who was determined not to let Bernie become president. I don't know that that's the fault of, or the Citizens United is the reason that happened.
Well, the Citizens United was very important because, they basically said, hey, the rich people, the corporations are in charge here. And it's not the average Democratic voter. The average Democratic voter didn't have much of a say. It's these parties. You only have two parties, and there's certain people that are powerful in those parties, and then they tend to be related to corporations and wealthy people. And the average voter just doesn't really have much of a say, I don't think.
Well, I mean, obviously we don't have much say. Our vote is a tiny percentage of the total, and unless we've got millions to spend, nobody listens to us. I think you a little bit underrate the corruption in the party. In other words, I would argue that if the Democratic Party stood foursquare for Medicare for all, if it was a pro-peace party instead of what it is a pro-war party, I think they would have the presidency right now. I think notwithstanding how much big money can swing elections in terms of buying ads and social media campaigns and all of that, if you do any kind of deep dive into the numbers in 2016 or 2024, it was Democratic policies that turned off a lot of voters, probably enough voters to give Trump the election both times.
You got to figure this way: if the Democrats go for Medicare for all and lessening the hold of the drug companies and so on and so forth, they're not going to get the millions and billions of dollars that the Republicans are getting. They're with the system being what it is, and at that time, the Citizens United had already been into effect. I mean, the Democrats really didn't have much of a chance or a choice, really. If they didn't compete with trying to get that money, they wouldn't have a chance to win. So, and they're in that position right now. What are they going to do? They can't compete with the Republicans when it comes to support from, the big money. So, what are they going to do? And I think that's part of the problem right now.
Well, they do compete. I mean, Harris raised more money than Trump did, actually. I believe she spent more money than Trump. She spent well over $1 billion, and often in very wasteful ways. And I do agree with you. I don't want to minimize it. Money is how you win races. There's no question. But there have been opportunities where Democrats could have stood against money. And I think 2016 is such a great example where Bernie was able to raise enough money from small donors to be competitive with Hillary. That was an opportunity for the Democratic leadership to say, okay, we have embraced fundraisers and fundraising and corporate donations and the like. But this is amazing. This guy's caught lightning in a bottle. He's doing it the right way, and he could win. And if he takes power, we could really change the system back. But they didn't do that. They said, no, we're going to double down on that strategy where we placate corporations, where we embrace pro-corporate policies, where we choose a candidate who has been pro-war consistently, who's meaning Hillary Clinton, pro-fracking, somebody who raised as much money or more from the oil and gas industry. And yet they could have at that moment, embraced a candidate who rejected all of that and probably would have won. So again, this was an opportunity where the Democrats could have repudiated the Citizens United, and instead they doubled down on that strategy.
I would have to disagree with you, because I think basically in the American political system, it's those who have the money, it's the rich people that have the power. They're not going to allow somebody like a democratic socialist like Bernie Sanders to get in there. The average Democratic voter may have wanted that, but not the people who are really in charge of the
poll after poll, Arlen, showed that he did better against Trump, that he was more popular than Hillary in a general election. There was no question about it. He reached out to independents far more effectively, for example, than Hillary did, and also to many Republicans. The Trump populist voter likes a lot of what Bernie had to say, and liked a lot of what Bernie had to say in 2016.
Well, look at the final result, Hal. The final result that was Bernie lost, and they weren't going to let him win. People who...
Well, isn't that the problem? Isn't that the problem? Is the Democratic Party elites did everything they in their very considerable power to undermine Bernie among Democratic voters. That's not Citizens United. That's the Democratic elites and establishment saying, we don't want to be a pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment party.
Well, as what I've been saying for so long, Hal, it's the political system we have now that's the problem, not any individual person or whatever. It's the the kind of political system we have where money counts, money is everything, and there's not much we can do about that. And then you have an electoral system that's way outdated and outmoded, where a person could still lose the presidency even if he had more of a popular vote. So our system is so messed up that we don't really have a chance until we change the system. And I don't know how we're going to change the system, but I think it's very necessary. And until that happens, you're going to have people with the most clout, the corporations, the billionaires who have the most money. They're the ones that are going to decide what's going on in this country. And they've been doing that for a long time.
All right, you're watching Halitics. We've got Arlen with us. We had a little bit of technical issues, and hope you found the stream because it's a really great conversation. I will edit it, put it together. Hopefully we'll have one video for everybody by tomorrow, or maybe later today, actually. Arlen Grossman with us on Halitics. Okay, so I put up on the screen this: majority of Americans support deporting immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally. Arlen, you said and I think it's true, that Citizens United has done a tremendous disservice to our democracy. It's taken it away to a significant degree, to the extent we had one to begin with. But Trump's anti-immigrant policies are actually what most Americans want. On the other hand, Kamala Harris never really articulated any policies, at least that I can think of, that most Americans wanted. Most Americans support Medicare for all. She didn't. Most Americans want us to pull back from these overseas adventures, including supporting genocide and the Ukraine endless war, proxy war with Russia. So given that fact, is that also the fault of Citizens United? I mean, you said you don't know how we're going to get break the stranglehold that big money has on our politics. But wasn't there an opportunity just in the last election, if Kamala Harris had just summoned the inner fortitude to say no to the donors, she probably would have won?
That's quite possible. The Democrats didn't really run a strong enough campaign to beat somebody like Trump, and Trump is very much tuned into what people are thinking and feeling, and I think the immigration issue was probably the biggest thing of all, because he took a stand on that, and unfortunately, Biden and other Democrats, pretty much let the borders be very loose for a long time and let too many people in that shouldn't have come in. People didn't want to see that. Trump said, hey, I could stop that from happening. And that was probably the biggest issue, I think, that won it for him.
Well, if Trump campaigned on a popular policy, admittedly one I loathe and revile, but if he campaigned on a popular policy and Harris didn't, and Trump won, does that mean we don't have a democracy, or does that mean we do have a democracy?
We don't really have a democracy because, again, Trump had money behind him. He had the Elon Musks and all these tech people, the Zuckerbergs and, all those tech people are suddenly on his side now and giving him money, and they're wanting to be part of, his organization. So you still have the problem of the big money, the big, powerful interests, the big corporations are still running the country, and probably are going to continue to do that until there's some major changes in our political system.
Well, Harris had just as much money. From what I understand, she spent even more. She actually spent more. And I understand you'll say, there's the super PACs, but she was on the air. She had plenty of support. It wasn't like she was ever had to go silent. And also she was wasteful. She spent poorly.
Yeah, no, she did not do a great campaign. I mean, she looked real nice and all that, but she didn't do what she needed to do, and that's separate herself from the Biden administration and past Democratic, administrations. And she should have gone for Medicare for all and a lot of other things like that, but she didn't. She was probably told, you got to be moderate. You're almost there. You can beat Trump, but she didn't. And by the way, as far as the money goes, yeah, Kamala probably got a little bit more money than Trump did, but in the final analysis, it was the Trump super PACs who were not directly affiliated with Trump, but they're the ones that had more money and eventually were able to overcome any advantages that
I'd like to see the evidence for that. I mean, that may be true. I just don't know where that money was spent, that it had such a great impact. What I understand is, and I'm going to play this clip here. You see Pramila Jayapal there with Sam Cedar, where she goes into why the Democrats lost. But what I understand is, it was a lot of unforced errors, including Harris. She did not go on the Joe Rogan program. That was a terrible mistake. Trump did. Rogan supported Bernie. He's not some sort of hard right guy whatsoever. He's a populist. He's the kind of popular with the exact voters that Harris needed and seemed to completely ignore and didn't want to even try to reach. So, people who are struggling, who are trying to make it, she didn't even seem to try to reach him. So I don't know how you can say that's a super PAC issue, Arlen.
Well, give her a little break, because she's only was able to run for 3 months or something like that. Trump had years to, build up his popular base and all of his policies. And she really, was kind of thrown in there and, was probably told, hey, be cautious, be moderate, and given the wrong advice. And she should have done it differently. You're right. And
I don't give her any break at all, Arlen. I give her zero break. This is supposedly Trump is this horrible analogy. You said he's kind of a Nazi-like person. Many people perceive him that way, describe him that way. And I don't give her a break at all. She should have been able to articulate. She's 59 years old. She has a long history in government. She is a trained lawyer. She should have very easily been able to make a strong case for her presidency. She failed utterly. Her record does not suggest in any way that she's pro-people, that she's pro-life, that she's pro-peace. So no, I won't give her any break.
I agree with you. She didn't run a good campaign. She didn't. The only thing she had going for her was that she was younger than Biden, and maybe could get some newer people involved in government. But she didn't really have the time to do it. She didn't have the time to make. And at the same time, you had all these people like Elon Musk pouring in billions of millions of dollars, and those
$500 million, I believe he spent at a minimum $500 million. So an enormous amount. It may have been more. It may have been more. That's what I understand. Let me play this clip because I'm not, and I don't play this clip to disprove or to even as an argument against what you're saying, because I actually think the fact that Democrats are so responsive to the military industrial complex, to corporations, I actually think that's kind of proves your point, right? That both parties are so, in the pocket, are so completely controlled by big money interests. I don't think it disproves your point, but I think it also doesn't excuse the Democrats, because they should have, when they have these opportunities, break with their corporate benefactors, and they invariably don't. But let me play this clip.
I really wonder if that group of people, young people and voters of color who have experienced maybe American imperialism or like the boot of the state, seeing every day on their feeds like a child whose brain is falling out of their skull as his father holds him up in Gaza. And Amnesty International now is calling it a genocide. Just that idea of like this, the economy's not working for me, and this is where our tax dollars are going. Yeah. Is the party reckoning with how this support for this slaughter has potentially damaged the party's brand long term for an entire generation of young people and also the voters you describe?
My honest answer to you is I don't think that conversation is happening. I really don't. I think it's been frustrating to me as somebody who shares, and has been really vocal on Gaza, and been targeted for it by some of the big moneyed interests on this issue, many of whom are Republican mega donors, by the way. I think that this, I agree with you that this was not, by the way, this was not just young people. It was not just folks who are Arab or Muslim or Middle Eastern even. It was Black folks. I mean, I think that we saw I was in a lot of communities with Black people talking to leaders of the Black community who were really pushing on this as well. And I do think that there was a real disillusionment with our foreign policy and, specifically on the war in the Middle East. I mean, I think that maybe there was some drop off early on with some other things, but
I'm going to stop it there. So when she said there's some drop off with some other things, I think she's talking about Ukraine. She doesn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole because the Democratic Party is so completely in lockstep with the endless war there, proxy war with Russia. But that did hurt the Democrats, and even more so this war with Gaza. So I mean, I think you're right. We don't have a democracy, but isn't the Democratic Party as much to blame because they pursued unpopular policies that are also monstrous?
All right. What bothers me right now, Hal, is couple for the last 5 minutes or so, you've been saying Democrat Party, just like the Republicans do. And it's supposed to be the Democratic Party. And the Republicans have done that on purpose, and you're just going along with it.
All right, I'm sorry. The Democratic tick party, the tick party, the party of the ticks. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Your answer is we need campaign finance reform. How are we going to get that if both parties are bought and paid for?
Well, let me go right back to what I said before. It's the political system that's the problem. You only have two parties to choose from: the Democrat and the Republican Party, Democratic and the Republican Party. I said too.
No, you didn't. To be fair to you, Arlen, you said the Democrats and the Republican Party. They are the Democrats, so you didn't do that. I don't think I did either. I don't say Democrat Party. I say Democratic Party. But I may soft spoke that last syllable, but I try to say Democratic. It's the name of the party. Go ahead.
The point is, we just don't have choices. It's not like in Europe when you have choices, several parties. You have a parliamentary system. It's just you have two major parties, and both of them are controlled by big moneyed interests, and that's not going to change until. Again, we change the system. I think we need to, do some constitutional amendments where we get rid of, the electoral college and all those problems. And, I don't see unfortunately, any progress in that area going to happen anytime soon. So, but I think it needs to.
Well, let me say, Arlen, that everything you say, I agree with. I really don't think. I think we basically agree. I think the way where there's some tension is I think you see this more as the Republican Party is the problem, and I just emphatically don't. I think the Democratic Party in many ways became worse, and I said Democratic Party became worse as a result of Citizens United. But even there, I can't completely blame it. You had Buckley v. Vallejo in 1976, which also greatly loosened. I think that's the case that said money is speech. And it was a terrible, terrible decision and had very significant negative ramifications, even as far back as 76. So we've been going down this road for a long time. But even, in the 19th century, you had the Lochner decision where the court said that corporations are people. So big money has always held a tremendous influence over our elections from the beginning. If you were poor, if you didn't own property, and you weren't white, and you weren't a man, you didn't get to vote. So even that was arguably even worse. Well, it was worse. Clearly it was worse, but I'm not sure whether the leadership necessarily was always worse. We did get a President Lincoln out of that in that situation. So you can get good presidents even with bad election laws. I think the thing that frustrates me the most, let me just say this one more time, is our Democratic Party has had opportunities, I believe, to win elections and elect people who are against Citizens United, and they've chosen not to go down that road.
Well, you got to look at it this way. The Republicans have worked very, very hard to get their kind of Supreme Court justices that they wanted. They took away Merrick Garland's chance to get on the court. They've pushed. They've spent a lot of money. They've got the Federalist Society telling them who to nominate, and so so now you have the Supreme Court is basically it's not a Democratic help at all. But I think when it comes right down to it, I think the Republicans are worse because they don't even pretend to be give democracy a chance, giving people with less money, working people, a chance. The Democrats at least try. They try to get prescriptions dropped. They try to get a little bit more for the working people, and but it's not enough. And you're right. Both parties have some problems they need to overcome, and I don't see it happening.
Here's where you wrote, the Democrats are a fair-minded, polite political party. And I was thinking of pushing back on that, but I'm gonna try to use that as an argument that bolsters my point, which is, in other words, it's true as far as it goes. And it also reflects, I think, the way money has corrupted the Democratic Party. If the Democrats really pushed hard, and I think they should, for pro-worker, pro-consumer, pro-peace policies, if they push really, really hard to get their judges and justices on the court, they'd piss off some of their corporate sponsors who don't like real progressive policies. So they're being fair-minded and polite and kind of not going too far, at least as their donor class sees it, is also part of the problem.
Yeah, I was being kind of sarcastic, and I don't know if
I was wondering about that.
Understood that, that the Democrats are just too nice. The Republicans are going to go all out and do whatever it takes to win. They don't care if it's nice or legal or whatever. But Democrats try to stick to the normal type of democracy that we've had before, and it hasn't worked. And then the Republicans have just taken advantage of all the rich people that are supporting them and all the tech people now, and that's why they're in front and they're in charge right now.
Yeah, my solution, Arlen, I know we don't see it the same way, and no one else on my program does either, but my solution is that the left embrace alternative parties to the Democrats. And I'm wondering, given that you perceive, I think accurately, correctly, that because of Citizens United, because of corruption by big money, both parties are pursuing policies that are bad for the American public, why you aren't more willing and or eager to try to build a third-party movement.
Well, that would be good. I wouldn't mind that happening if the third party had a chance. Somehow they don't really have much of a chance because the rules are in favor of the Democrats, the Republicans, and they do everything in their power to keep power. But I think the basic solution to all of this really is public financing of elections. If you take money out of politics, then you'll have that. People actually will have some choices and they will have some power, but until you have the public financing, it's going to be money that's going to be running everything, and you got to take the money out of politics, and that would work.
I agree, but I don't know how we get to a corruption not free, but a situation where maybe the top donation is $3,300, period, and it can only be given by a human being, period, end of story. That's it. There's no super PACs, there's no bundlers, there's no corporate donations, there's none of that. Each human being can give up to this amount. And I think the number you put in your article, 3,300, which, by the way, people should definitely read. Go to thebigpicturereport.com. It's also posted at opednews.com. How the Supreme Court killed our democracy, or is it the day democracy died? I'm so bad.
January 10, 2011. I don't know. Whatever I said was the date that Citizens United came out and Obama warned everybody, and Alito said, "Oh no, that's not going to happen." And it turns out, Obama was right, Alito was wrong, and we are stuck with what we've got.
So, given that, I do think people should check it out. But Arlen, I don't know how we get campaign finance reform. We can't even get an end to congressional stock trading.
Yeah. There's no question about it. It's going to be very difficult, if nearly impossible, for something like that to happen. Public financing. I mean, we came kind of close. There was, people were thinking about that Feingold, McCain resolution, and if that had gone into effect, then maybe big money wouldn't have as much power as they do now. But it was thrown under the bus like a lot of other things, and we are stuck with what we've got right now.
All right, Arlen, well, we're at the end of the hour, but I'd like to go another 15 minutes. I don't have much more time than that, but the fact that we had to interrupt the program due to a I don't know what, some sort of streaming situation. I don't know if I have to buy a new computer or a new processor. I really, really hope I don't. This is a pretty good unit I have, so I'm hoping it's some momentary issue. Who knows what? I'm going to give you a couple of choices. One, we can go with the Greg Palast article that you linked to. Actually, it came from TomHartman.com. Or we could also talk a little bit more about what's going on in Gaza under Trump. So a change in new boss here, but maybe no better ultimate end for the Palestinians. That's a second choice. Or I'll give you one more. I found a very irritating tweet. And by the way, folks who want to hear any of these stories, don't worry about it. I'll talk about them. The ones we don't talk about today, I'll talk about tomorrow. I've got a pretty annoying tweet by a columnist you may or may not appreciate, Jamel Bowie at the New York Times, that I thought was hyper partisan. So what do you want to talk about? Jamel Bowie tweet, new boss, same as the old boss when it comes to Gaza, or Greg Palast and the election was stolen from Kamala?
Well, as far as the Greg Palast thing, I don't think there's any question, in my mind at least, that the Republicans have been pushing hard to disrupt the ability to vote for people who tend to vote Democratic. I mean, they've tended to take a lot of people off the voter rolls who would be Democratic. They've done all that they possibly can. Gerrymandering is absurd, but they do that, and that's certainly unfair. And, all of those things, again, are part of the political system that, we have to do something about. And it's going to be really hard to do with the Republicans in power, of course, right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples of laws that Republicans have pushed to make it more difficult for folks to vote. There's certainly, and Palast goes through those in quite a bit of detail at the Hartman report. And as far as I can tell, his examples of voter suppression go back at least to 2000 and the Gore v. Bush election. Let me put up some of what he calls the key numbers. I'll just put the whole thing up. But I do have a bit of a problem with this article, which I'll get to in just a moment. I mentioned to you, Arlen, during the prep time that we did. But here are some of his key numbers, and they're very problematic, very troubling. Nearly 5 million voters wrongly purged from voter rolls. As of August 24, 317,000 plus voters had been challenged. Over 200,000 in Georgia alone by Election Day. I don't know what Election Day they're referring to there. No fewer than 2+ million mail-in ballots disqualified for minor clerical errors. Over 500,000 in-precinct ballots were disqualified. 1.2 million provisional ballots were rejected, and over 3 million new registrations were rejected. And Palast takes those key numbers and he massages them, and he says that led to a Trump victory, and without all those actions, those anti-democratic actions, Harris would have won. But as I mentioned to you, Arlen, I have a lot of problems with this. He doesn't provide any links to any of these key numbers. He just puts them there and says, believe me, these are true. This is what happened. He also doesn't do any data analysis that would show that the voters that were purged would have voted for Harris rather than stay home, or maybe some would have crossed over. So, and we don't know when he's referring to. I tried. I really did. I wanted, I'm like, because I don't totally reject this. It may be true that it was voter suppression, that legal, in quotes, efforts to keep American citizens from voting were effective enough to swing the election. I don't say that's not true. But I think you have to do more than just simply throw a bunch of numbers on a page and say this is what happened. I think you've got to explain your calculus. You have to explain where the numbers came from. And Palast doesn't do that.
Well, not in this article. I think you have to go back maybe to his some of his previous writings. I'm not sure, but I don't think there's any doubt about it that, because of our system where states get to control how we vote, it's not a national thing. It's each state decides how they're going to do things. And so many Republican states, where they control both, legislative houses and the governorship. They're able to do a lot of these things and, make it. And as far as who they're targeting, you could be pretty well sure they're going to be targeting people who are generally going to vote Democratic. They're going to, get the poor people, the students, they're going to try to stop those, people who don't have ID. They're going to stop those people from making it difficult, at least, for them to vote. And it's got to make a difference. I'm not sure it made the difference, but it's got to make a big difference.
I mean, did it? You say it's got to, but where's, again, the evidence that it did? And moreover, I don't know that I can even rely on his data, his numbers. If some of those reports, the studies that he cites go back to the 2000 election, that's 24 years before Trump just beat Harris. So, I mean, I just can't really give much credence to Palast. I think there has to be something that's done with some level of rigor in terms of proof, and it isn't there. I get that it's exactly what Tom Hartman would prefer to believe, and I'm not saying it's not true, but what I'm saying is I don't think we can rely on it to be true. And I want to give you another number. Here's what. Well, let me just put this here. This is what Palast writes. Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. He says that definitively. He doesn't say, well, if my analysis is correct, or if this or if that. He says that absolutely with certitude. And I mean, how can you take that, seriously? I cannot take that seriously without a much more in-depth, detailed analysis. I would just note that according to the Harris campaign itself, they said after the election, not one of their internal polls had her ahead. Now, the internal polls presumably aren't accounting for voter suppression. Many people who think their votes will count don't, according to those who claim that voter suppression is rampant. People vote, and then their votes are taken out of the count. That may all be true. But if the Harris campaign itself, if its staffers say we were behind from day one, that disproves what Palast said, if that's accurate.
I don't think there's any doubt that at one point, at least, it was close. I think, Harris would have had a chance if she ran a better campaign.
I thought she was going to win, Arlen. I absolutely close. I looked at those polls. I said she's ahead. I thought, she was going to win that election.
There's something else I think we need to talk about too, and that is the media nowadays. There's so many right-wing MAGA sources who, from Fox News and their imitators, to the radio talk, hate radio shows, and internet sites and all that. They're very powerful, very strong, and they make money by scaring people and getting people, to believe what they're saying. And I don't think there's really that much, even though people say, oh, the press is liberal and all that, New York Times and all that, but I don't think there's that many, people on the left who are actually going to be, as strong about these kind of things as they are with the MAGA people. I mean, like I say, the Democrats are polite. They're going to try to be fair. And the Republicans don't care about being fair or honest. They just want to win.
Well, if this megalith, if this leviathan of right-wing media is so incredibly powerful, how come you didn't fall for it? I mean, what makes you so brilliant and incisive that you can cut through all the propaganda and so many other people can't?
Well, let me tell you how it's because I'm a political pundit and a thought leader. And
Yes.
besides that, I've been watching and listening and studying politics for, decades now. And so I know what's real and what isn't real. A lot of people don't. They see, Fox News gives them all the things that Republicans want them to see and ignores all the things that the Republicans don't want them to see. And I think that has an effect on people. And there's some,
I agree with you, and I didn't mean to be too, obnoxious or however you want to characterize that question. Ironic. I agree. Media is incredibly influential, but maybe what you aren't doing is recognizing the influence of the media that you consume, and that maybe it is presenting, just as Fox, unquestionably, in my view, presents a very inaccurate, imbalanced, and unfair view. So may the New York Times, so may CNN, so do the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC in different ways. And I think the facts, at least when it comes to New York Times, maybe not so much the cable stations, but when it comes to the facts, the New York Times is far more credible, more reliable, as is the Washington Post, than any right-wing source. But the conclusions they draw, and there are many omissions, I think are very misleading and misrepresentative sometimes.
Well, I think there's a big difference. Like if you compare Fox News and MSNBC, now both are obviously biased in one direction. Fox News is biased in the direction of the right wing, of MAG and all that, and MSNBC toward the left. But the difference is Fox News will lie, they'll hide things, they will do everything in their power to help their cause. And I think MSNBC is definitely biased toward the left, but I don't think they're going to lie or come up with false stories or hide things, not to the extent that.
Well, Joy Reid said that Kamala ran a flawless campaign. That sounds like hype to me. And you even acknowledged, I hate to throw your own words back at you, Arlen, but you even said on this program that one thing about Fox is they would have liberals on, they would have progressives on, whereas MSNBC never has, probably had not one true MAGA supporter, not one pro-MAGA person on their program.
And that's one criticism I have of MSNBC. I think they're wrong to do it that way. I think, Fox at least pretends that, there's another side, and, I'll give them credit for that, but they still do everything in their power to make sure that, Trump wins, the Republicans win. And, MSNBC, they try to make everything sound good for the Dems and the liberals, but, that it's not to the extent that the right-wing networks do, I don't think.
All right, Arlen, I think that's going to do it for me. But if you have anything you want to throw on the pile before we put this off for, I guess, 6 days until Monday, when we'll have an Arlen Monday, let me know. Is there anything we missed? Anything I didn't let you get in? You were chomping at the bit to say, and I cut you off. Now's your moment.
I've said a lot of what I wanted to say, but the things are happening, like I said, so fast that it's hard to keep up with what's going on. And, we just have to watch it and hope that there's going to be some kind of opposition to some of these things. But so far, the opposition seems to be very weak. The Congress is very weak. They're letting Trump get away with whatever he wants. The Democrats seem to not know what to do. So all we can do is watch and see how bad it gets, and see, if somebody comes up with some ideas that will challenge Trump and make sure he doesn't become a dictator.
All right, I always let you have the last word, but here I'm going to break my own rule and just comment, not so much challenge, but comment. And this is actually something I think you probably would agree with, Arlen. To be fair to the Democrats, they do not have a majority in either house. They really have limited ability in this moment to stop Trump.
Yeah, and it didn't used to be that way. They used to have, both parties had, some people a little bit more to the left, some people a little bit more to the right, some moderates, but now you don't have that anymore. Certainly on the Republican side, they're almost, 98% MAGA, I think. They're Trump's party, totally. And the Democrats, don't, are totally the other way. So, yeah, we got a problem.
I'll see you Monday, 6 days from now. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Hal.